This shows that China is going, this is end of regime conduct. So when you have the Chinese lashing out at the Philippines at Sandy Key, as you just showed, this is really very perplexing behavior, and it shows that something is very, very wrong in Beijing right now.
Wow. Meanwhile, China's Huawei is preparing to test a new and what they claim to be more powerful AI processing chip. They are hoping it's going to surpass NVIDIA and the H100 chip.
Good 11. A viral AI-generated video is making fun of U.S.-China trade relations as tensions escalate. It's a 32-second clip. It portrays a struggling America under Trump's tariffs with exhausted workers in sweatshops. The video, with over 5 million views, has sparked online debates about tariffs and manufacturing jobs. The video ends saying, "Make America great again."
Meanwhile, the Philippines is denying reports that China seized control of that disputed reef in the South China Sea, Gordon, and then they unfurled their flag on the island. Now both countries' flags are flying on the reef. China's Coast Guard is accusing the Filipino personnel of illegally boarding the reef, even as both countries claim control over it. So how are they denying it if, in fact, they unfurled the flag? I spoke with National Security Advisor Mike Waltz yesterday, and I asked him about it, and I asked him how the U.S. is going to respond to China's aggression. Watch this.
When I'm looking at this from a national security standpoint, we have to bring our supply chains home. We saw even cheap items like mask, gowns, and gloves, if they're made abroad and not made here, become a national security issue. We have to have clean supply chains for our military equipment. That is a key element. Rebuilding our military under Pete Hegseth, Secretary Hegseth, focused on meritocracy and lethality, is a key element. And then, of course, working with our allies, and it's no accident that President Trump had Prime Minister Modi of India, had Prime Minister Ishiba of Japan, and made calls to the Prime Minister of Australia and South Korea. Yeah. All of those pieces are key elements of our competition with China.
Gordon, your reaction?
This is really important because at a time when China needs friends, because it's not selling goods to the U.S., it is going out of its way to antagonize not just the Philippines, not just Taiwan, but also South Korea and Australia. This shows that China is going, this is end of regime conduct. Because, you know, Xi Jinping, he can't appear to be giving in to the U.S. He has configured the Chinese political system so that it is hostile. And also, because he's been making the claim that China has surpassed the U.S., he can't look dependent on trade with the U.S., and he certainly can't look like he's talking to the U.S. under pressure.
Right now, the two countries are in a game of chicken, and the Chinese are waiting for a real signal from President Trump in the form of dropping the unilateral tariffs or reducing them substantially. I think actually President Trump did blink last week when he said that he expected to reduce those tariffs. But I think the Chinese decided not to recognize that. At least the Chinese officials decided not to recognize it. Maybe they saw it more as a wink than a blink, and they don't trust it. But I think, it's not just the Chinese, frankly. It's the world, and I think China's feeling pretty confident in their assessment of President Trump, and that, many other countries are also looking at the United States in the same way.
Within the Xi realpolitik, do they have the power and the leverage to say to other nations, if you dance with President Trump, you won't dance with China? Do they have that power to say that, to act on that?
It's been interesting to me as I've watched the Chinese go around, first with the charm offensive in Asia and Europe, and then with the more coercive sort of approach that you just noted. I've been surprised at the extent to which China has not managed to translate, the sort of chaotic policy and bullying behavior of the United States into a sort of a greater leverage for China itself.
Was kind of trying the sweet approach, referring to Xi Jinping many times, including during the campaign, as my friend Xi Jinping. But what President Trump has had to do in the last month is keep raising the tariffs. They just won't come to the table. This all happened again in the first term when it took a year to get the first round of talks starting. So I'm getting pessimistic. As long as we don't get a phone call from Xi Jinping or he doesn't stop these negative gestures toward us, it's just not looking good.
So what do you make about this? Again, these are threats. This is language that is coming from the CCP, that they're going to find a way to circumvent the United States, make deals with others, strong-arm other countries.
Well, one of the big debates among American-China experts over the last few years has been how strong are the hardliners around Xi Jinping. He's portrayed himself as a moderate and kind of a balancer with the pro-Mao kind of left-wingers on one side and then the hardliners on the other. When this kind of statement comes out, Cheryl, it's a sign to us that Xi Jinping is under pressure. He's got to say something anti-American. They already say a lot of anti-American things, that we're on the decline, that we're corrupt. There's even been a couple of Chinese books that we're going to fragment into pieces. It's kind of the equivalent of our idea of the collapse of China. They've got a theory of the collapse of America. Mm-hmm. So he's under pressure. There's some rumors coming out of Beijing that there's some sort of power struggle going on, that the sons of a couple of leaders who were reformers are now criticizing Xi Jinping on the one side, and then the other side is the hardliners could be much stronger than we thought. This is not good news for us. They did seem to soften, Cheryl, last week. They said, well, if Mr. Trump would just name a point man, one person to represent him, then they would start the talks. I somehow think that's not true. That's kind of the reformers trying to speak up. But Mr. Trump still has not named the point man who's going to be in charge of the talks. Last time, as you know, it was Bob Lighthizer at USTR, sometimes Treasury Secretary. But this is not looking like a smooth situation with the Chinese at all. It's looking the opposite. That I'm getting more pessimistic about the talks getting going.
Well, the South Koreans are coming this week, so there's at least those discussions underway. And we know that the Japanese have been here.
Mr. Xi is urging the financial hub to expedite efforts to become a tech and innovation hub with global influence, with the local tech sector riding high on the success of DeepSeek. Now, this includes ramping up AI development. Mr. Xi also visited the New Development Bank. Now, that's a multilateral bank of BRICS member nations, and met its president, Dilma Rousseff, who's also a former Brazilian president. Now, state media says Mr. Xi expressed a willingness to boost cooperation in green and sustainable development. This is his first trip to the financial hub since November 2023. Mr. Xi also vowed to safeguard their rights and interests, as well as the common interests of the international community. Officials have remained fully confident of hitting the country's annual growth target of around 5%, and announced a series of measures to protect the economy and workers from the intensifying trade war.
Tell us more.
Yeah, the important thing here is that China, without any announcements, is not collecting tariffs on important goods. So, for instance, some semiconductors, aviation products, industrial chemicals, medical devices, some medicines. And also, they're going to expand that list because there are lists circulating in China of 131 items that China may not impose tariffs. So this is going to expand. It means that China is made an important concession, but it's not saying it's making a concession, which is a fascinating insight into the Chinese political system right now, which has become both intransigent and inflexible.
Yeah, it's interesting because the president has said now is the time to hit China with these tariffs, given that economy is in a weakened position. How would you assess the Chinese economy right now? And what is the impact of a 145% tariff on Chinese goods coming into the U.S., Gordon?
Yeah, it's not growing at the 5.4% pace that they reported for Q1. It's probably contracting, as we can see from the price data from both February and March, which signals that China's in a deflationary spiral. We are seeing underlying indicators that point to contraction, including tax receipts that were down 3.5% for the quarter. That's inconsistent with robust growth. And if China is not contracting now, somehow, it will be contracting very soon. So when you talk about 145% general tariff on Chinese goods, this really means that many factories aren't going to be selling anything to the U.S., which explains why some factories have already closed and other factories are cutting down their shifts.